If you want to know how to build an 8 or 9 figure business, then I'm going to tell you about a guy who spent the first decade of his business life struggling so bad that even though I was the owner of the business, I had so little profit coming in that at the end of the day, after all the customers left and all the employees left, I would follow them out, lock the door behind them so that they couldn't see what I was about to do. Then I'd get all these cleaning supplies out and I'd vacuum the entire place. And then I'd strap on some rubber gloves and I'd bleach the bathrooms and the toilets. And this was a health club, so there were a lot of freaking toilets. And then if I wasn't completely comatose from the bleach, I'd go into my office and I'd sit there and I would try to find some way to run a sale so I could make enough money to make payroll that month. Because even though my business was making a lot of gross revenue, I had no clue at the time how to manage cash flow. So although we had a few decent months, most of the months were close to break even. And during those months, I literally lived on credit cards. In fact, one night I woke up sweating because I remembered that I had payroll due the next day and I didn't think I had nearly enough money in the account to pay it. So I did what, I don't know, any good business person would do. I got up super early and I drove to the club before anybody else showed up, and I sat down behind the reception desk and I pulled out 6 of my own personal credit cards. And one by one, I started swiping them and guessing how much money I had left in each one of those. And I tried to put enough money into my business account using my personal credit cards. But when I tried to swipe the 4th card, the system locked out and the phone rang. And I found out the hard way, obviously, that it's apparently against the rules to swipe your own credit cards through your POS machine. And by the way, the guy from the merchant company who called me up was super nice, but he obviously declined all the money that I had put in there. Plus, he was going to shut down my account so that I couldn't process any cards ever again. And I was literally in tears, frustrated, begging him not to shut down the system because I had a business to run, right? And I had employees coming in to be paid. So again, he was super understanding, and he faxed me a whole bunch of paperwork that I had to sign saying that I would, never do that again. And then I discounted everything that day, and I handed out payroll checks at the end of the day, and I asked a few of my longer term employees to please don't cash your checks for a few days, and they were really nice about it. But a guy who went from that, literally struggling for almost a decade, even though I was busting my butt 100+ hours a week and still watching my competitors grow with what seemed like so much less effort. But during that time, I was also reading a ton of books and I was going to seminars. And when we had a few good months, I'd save up that money and I would always use it to hire somebody to help me grow. Plus, I had the very good fortune to be in the health club industry, which gave me access to a lot of big business people who desperately wanted to get their health back, which I was very good at helping them with at the time. So I made friends with some super smart business owners, and I got to pick their brain, and I did it every freaking chance that I got. And there's a lot more to this story, but in short, after almost losing my business for a stupid mistake, I spent the next 2 years revamping everything. And those were by far the best 2 years up to that point. We made more money, we made more profit, we reached more people than the previous 10 years combined. And one of the great parts of having grown the way that we did was that now we were a sellable company. And after that 24-month period of time of tweaking everything, that company that was cash poor for those years sold for more money than I had ever seen a chain of health clubs sell for at the time, because we defined what success would look like. And I hung out with smart people who were willing to help guide me, and I focused on the few things that actually grow companies. And I'll get far more detailed about these things in this episode. But every step we take in business uncovers lessons that we still need to learn. Every stage that we get to requires that we learn lessons and become better so that we could get to the next level. And one of the main lessons that I learned from the sale of that company was that when you sell your company the wrong way, you could end up paying millions in taxes. And in this particular case, I sold it as an asset instead of a stock sale, and that was the mistake. But if I had access to someone who had sold a company before, I would have walked away with a lot more money in my pocket. And that lesson cost me a whole lot of money back then to learn. However, I built and sold and acquired a bunch of companies since then, and I have never made that mistake again. So the real lesson that I learned was that I needed guidance from somebody who had already had a track record of building businesses and personal wealth. So I stopped relying on friends and I started paying mentors to help me. And I started with 2 mentors. That was back in 2004. And I still work with those 2 guys because they've both built multiple large companies. So every single time I talk with them, I get deep insight into how other entrepreneurs drive growth in different industries. And the result of that is that now I have a portfolio of 12 successful companies, and I've had 3 exits, and I've advised over 100 other companies that have 3, 4, 10x their growth in less than 12 months based on what we're going to cover in this episode. On the other hand, I've also built a bunch of smaller companies that either haven't hit the 8-figure mark yet or just plain tanked, because sometimes when you try to push through a new level of growth without having the right systems or knowing how to build the right teams or having the right guidance, things fail. And there have definitely been times in my life that I let my ego go, and that always cost me money. And I show you this so that you know my track record. I've had some big wins and I've had a few losses, probably just like you, and I learned lessons at every single stage. Every new industry that I go into, every time a new competitor comes in, every time a market changes, every time I invest in or advise a company to scale, I learn lessons. And I'm a firm believer that the speed at which you grow is directly determined by how fast you learn lessons and then systematize those lessons so that you're not doomed to keep repeating them over and over and over again. Now, the other night, I had some friends over for dinner, and each of those friends owns a relatively large company. So we spoke a whole lot about business during dinner. But after dinner, we went outside and we talked about what it really takes to grow a business right now in today's hectic world. And we went really deep on 4 pillars that have been the foundation to all of our successes. And if you're in business, especially if you have really big goals to grow over the next 12 months, then these 4 pillars are going to be vital for you to keep on your mind too. The very first one is understanding the right metrics to track in business. And I'm going to save this one for last, and I'm purposely doing that because I know that there's somebody listening to this who's going to grab those metrics and kind of think that they have everything they need to grow. But if they did that, they'd fail. Because I could walk into almost any company and 5 or 10x its growth curve, normally with just a few simple changes. But what you can't do is build a company with a burned out owner or CEO. And the other 3 pillars that we're going to talk about make you a better leader and make you a better decision maker, which is vital to you consistently growing in both your business and in your personal wealth. So here are the 4 pillars. I'm just going to list them out first, and then we'll go over each one in detail. But I'm going to save business for last. The first one is business growth, right? And we're all focused on business growth, tracking our growth with specific metrics, because businesses are tools to fund our life. So it's one of the 4 pillars that we focus on every single day. The second is strong relationships. The third is health, which is both cognitive health so that you can make the split-second decisions necessary, and physical health so that you can have the energy needed to live a great life. And the fourth is developing personal wealth. Now, each of the people at dinner that night have built multiple large 8- and 9-figure companies. They're all serial entrepreneurs, meaning they're consistently building and investing in companies and then growing those companies. So when I tell you that we spoke about relationships being the cornerstone to our success, you need to understand that this is not something that we're just thinking about now that we've had some level of success. It's something that has been on the top of our minds since day one, and probably one of the main reasons why we've been able to be successful. Because it doesn't matter if you're just starting out in business and struggling, to break your first $100,000, or if your company already brings in millions a day or more. Taking care of the relationships in your life needs to be one of your primary focuses every single day, including relationships with your prospects, with your customers, with your team, with your partners, with your vendors, and with your family. If you drop the ball on any one of them, it affects all the others. One of the most important lessons that I learned about relationships is that everybody in your life yearns to feel heard and safe. And the moment one of your team members doesn't feel heard, they're going to start talking bad about you and your company. And they're eventually going to become a virus in your company. And the moment that they don't feel safe, meaning that they think that their job is on the line, then they've already rewritten their resume. They've updated it. They posted it online. And they're no longer giving you 100% at the office. And the same is true for your kids. And the same is true for your spouse. And the same is true for your family and your friends and your customers and your prospects and everybody else. When you communicate with people, the number one most important goal that you should have is to understand what they need. You need to make them feel heard. And when you reply to them, you need to make them feel safe. Because most of the time when a relationship goes to crap, it's because you needed to be heard instead of trying to understand the other person. That doesn't mean that you always have to be the one who's understanding and never being the one who's being heard. It means that if you want to be the most successful that you could be, then you need to take the high ground and constantly make those around you feel heard and safe. And when you do that, you're going to be surprised at how other people go out of their way to make you feel heard and safe too. Now, the next area that we spoke about after dinner, and the one that was the most exciting for me, because I'll be honest with you, it's been a hobby of mine since I was a teenager, is health. And I've been kind of a nerd when it comes to anything related to physical and cognitive health. So this may get a little bit weird. But some of the top things on that list that had a really massive impact on our ability to think more clearly or physically perform better are reading every single day, because the act of reading changes how your brain processes information. So although audiobooks are really great for getting more information in faster, the act of reading exercises your brain and allows you to process that information better. Next was sleep, which has been a study of mine for the last decade. In fact, I did a podcast a few months back with Dr. Kirk Parsley, who's a really good friend of mine, and we spoke for probably about 2.5 hours on how he optimizes the sleep for the executives in his executive health program and for the Navy SEALs that he works with. And if you haven't heard that episode, jump over to my channel on YouTube and type in sleep. It's really well worth it for you to hear. But then we got into this long list of other tactics to improve our brain and our body, including getting regular blood tests to track your health internally, taking saunas for at least 4 to 5 days a week for 20 minutes at like 190 to 200 degrees, and exercising with weights 5 days a week, and doing some kind of cardio for about 150 minutes a week, and walking after every single meal for at least 10 minutes, and spending time in the sunlight and walking on the beach and doing deep breathing exercises and meditating for 20 minutes before bed and staying well hydrated. And the list went on and on and on when it came to this section. Or maybe it was just that this section made me the most excited and that's why I took the most notes on it. But what was really interesting was when one person said that we should think about the natural things in life that we don't do when we get busy at the office, the things that we used to do when we were kids. Like, we don't laugh as much, even though we know that laughing releases chemicals in our body that keeps us mentally and physically healthy. And most people don't sweat every single day. I mean, think about it. When's the last time you actually sweat? But sweating is one of the most basic ways of ridding yourself of toxins. And when we're really focused at work, we're not grateful. Even though the act of being grateful changes how we process information and how we come up with solutions to challenges at work. Basically, we don't do any of the things, or we don't prioritize the small things that keep our body and our brain optimized. But after we were talking about health, the next topic was building wealth, which is also another thing that I really enjoy focusing on. And it's funny how when you're in a room with really successful people, everybody's completely open about money, as opposed to when you're hanging out with people who don't have a lot of money and nobody wants to share actual numbers with you. And it's also strange how people who are very successful invest their money in completely different places than you'll ever hear anybody talk about on social media. Because if you pull up almost, any social media channel about where to invest money, you'll hear about stocks and bonds and crypto and real estate and a bunch of other things. And those are all outstanding places that have made people very wealthy. But they're also extremely risky. And every one of those investments have made 100 times more people poor than it's made wealthy. On the other hand, successful people put their money places where they have a strong understanding. Now, I've spent, as an example, over 30 years growing businesses. I've grown a portfolio of my own companies, and I've invested in companies where I not just bring some money, but I bring relationships and experience. In exchange, I take a percentage of those companies. Also, 1 day a week for the past 15 or so years, I've coached people in a program called Club 28, where we work one-on-one with a small handful of companies every single year to help them grow. Now, they pay a ton of money to be in that program, but they keep 100% of their company, and I have a very strong track record of helping companies in Club 28 grow. And I tell you that so that you could see that I have a very unique insight into growing companies. I see inside of my own companies and my teams, plus I see behind the scenes in the companies that I invest in and that I coach. So the safest place for me to ever put money as an investment is not into stocks and bonds. It's into companies that I could bring my experience to and help them grow, because that's what I know. I don't know a lot about stocks. I don't know a lot about crypto or real estate because I spend my days in business. One person who was at dinner that night has been in the commercial real estate field for decades, and he puts almost all of his investment money into commercial real estate because that's what he knows. Another guy owns a construction company, and he invests all of his money into large equipment like backhoes and the cranes that they use to build these high-rise buildings because that's what he knows. Yes, everybody also has some money in stocks and bonds and maybe in some crypto, but highly successful people put their money into investment vehicles that they have a lot of understanding in, because successful people don't gamble with their future or the future of their kids or their grandkids or their great-grandkids. Our focus is on building wealth that will last. Okay, so I said I was going to say business growth for last. So let's dig into some of the metrics that every one of those people that night at dinner looks at in their business, and that my team and I look at in each one of the companies in my portfolio too. And we look at these every single day, because when you have a metric, you need to see it daily. And there's far more than just these four, but these are the four top-level metrics that we consistently look at across the board in all of these companies. And they're revenue, reach, retention, and organization. Now, reach is just another word for market share. And we don't ever just focus on growing revenue. That's a mistake. We focus on growing market share. Everyone on our team knows who our top competitors are, how much of the market they control, and how they control it. That way, my teams have a clear target, because we could grow a company faster by taking market share than by constantly running promotions. And every large company knows this. When I was in the health club industry, I used to run local TV and radio ads that basically said that if you had a gym membership someplace else that you didn't like, whether that's because the current gym that you went to was messy or it smelled or their equipment was old or the staff was rude, whatever it was, if you didn't like your current gym membership, then I'd buy that membership from you when you joined my clubs. And basically all we did was, if you had 4 months left on your contract with that other club, we would just add that on to any membership that you bought from us that day, which made all of our competitors super freaking pissed and their members very angry at them. And within 2 years of running that promo, we took so much market share that 3 of my competitors went out of business. So when your team understands who's on your list of owning market share in your industry, and by the way, you better have a freaking list, because then it becomes a game. You just need to decide who's on your list and who you're going to target. Then learn as much about them as possible and get creative with new ways to be better and be smarter than they are. That's reach. And there are secondary metrics like market penetration under that. But those will be very specific to your industry and your business. Then there's revenue. But revenue needs to be tracked at least as gross revenue, as net revenue, and as net margin. And revenue should always be tracked, again, at least weekly, and also this month, and also this quarter, and also this year, and also last time this year, and also last month this time. See, our daily reports break revenue down in a lot of different ways because numbers tell stories. And when you look at the numbers every single day, you'll clearly see the story that they tell, which gives you the ability to make better, faster decisions than your competitors who are probably looking at their numbers monthly or maybe not even at all. And then retention is the third metric that we all track, which can be anything from, lifetime value to customer retention to net promoter score to average recurring revenue. There's a lot of them in there. But know this, most stagnant companies are stagnant because they fail to track retention. So you need to make this a priority. We have a client in Club 28 that was stuck at $5 million a year for years. And after being in the program for a little more than 2 years, they were over $50 million. And I don't audit the books of any companies inside of that program, but I definitely saw them grow every week. So my guess is that those numbers were pretty damn accurate. And we really only had to change 2 things in that company. And one was to get them to track and focus on retention, meaning how long does somebody keep buying from you after their first purchase? And by the way, retention is far more than just a metric for how much a customer is worth. It's more important to look at it as a metric that shows how good your product is and how good your team is. So if your retention is low, first look at improving your product and the way that your team interacts with your customers. And the last metric that's on our list is organization, which some people call structure, which includes everything about your people and your vendors and your systems and your tech and your warehouse if you have a warehouse and your inventory if you have that. It's everything that holds the boat together and holds the boat afloat as you keep bringing more and more customers on board. And there's definitely a lot more metrics than just that we track. But I kind of wanted to give you the 4 that were on all of our lists so that you could see what other successful companies are tracking, so that you could do some research and see how to track those in your business too. Because the truth is, you only have one responsibility as the owner of your company, and that's to consistently grow in an honest, ethical, moral, legal way. And that's not just for publicly traded companies that answer to investors. It's also for the startup company, or for the $1 million company, or for the 10 or 30 or 40 or $100 million a year company. You have a responsibility to your company, to your team, to your customers, to yourself, to your family, to grow every year, if not every quarter or every single month. And again, that's not difficult when you stop getting distracted and you start focusing on these 4 areas that we just spoke about, and you surround yourself with smart people who have a track record of success and who will pull you up with them. I hope you got a lot of value out of today's show. And if you did, share it with a friend and comment so that I know what you want in the next episode.